Hi everyone, I'm Allison. Thanks for joining me for Where I'm From 87 with Joanne. What have you been reading? I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay, which is a like murder mystery set at a boarding school, but the protagonist looks like her reflecting on her time at her boarding school, and a lot of that resonated for me because we're close to the same age. Hi, Joanne.
Hi,
How are you? You're here. You made it. It was all easy.
I made it. I put it on Do Not Disturb because I'm afraid
Yes.
of it.
Oh,
But then
yes.
wasn't sure I would get your thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now then.
Yeah. Because I have emails popping up, but they aren't.
Okay,
Um,
good.
yeah. Because I think if you don't put it on Do Not Disturb, sometimes it'll like break up your feed and
That's
distract
what I
you.
was worried about.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so, how are you today?
I'm I'm good. I'm excited
Yes.
to be here.
You're
Yeah,
here.
this is
So,
fun. This is all new for me.
have you ever done a live before?
I,
Yeah.
I don't really even put my face on,
Yes, I noticed that.
my
When I was
face,
looking at your
but I'm
account, I
warming
was
up to
like,
it.
I
My
don't know if I know what Joanne looks like, really. So I was like, oh, okay. It's fun to meet people. Even though this isn't like real life, it is still nice to meet people in
I
this way.
know, I know.
Yeah.
I've
And
met so many good people
I,
through these writing binders and these writing Instagrams. And so it's very fun. But yes, I'm warming up to putting my face on the feminist parent. My editor is like,
yeah, I, I would guess that you would have some pressure to put your face out there. I would guess with the release of your book, you'll be doing more things like this. Many, many more things like
this
this.
is great practice. I get to read
Yes.
more
Yeah.
papers.
Yeah, I think from my like observation, it seems like there is more and more desire to make people into brands, that they don't just want text.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I get it, right? It
Yeah.
sells books, and I do want people to read my book because I believe
Yeah.
so deeply in the message.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm also, a clinical psychologist that sits in a little office one on one with somebody, and that is like my comfort zone.
Right.
Totally.
Right. You became a clinical psychologist because that's what you wanted to do. Like if you'd wanted to be a person who was out in front of everyone, you would have made a different choice.
There you go. Right.
Yeah, I get that. So I'm very excited for your book and your poem. What is the title of your book, Joanne?
Oh God, the working title,
Mm-hmm.
we're still working on it,
Mm-hmm.
but the working title is Beyond Girl Power,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that sort of this girl power has become so cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And parents, it's one thing to sort of buy RBG paraphernalia and take girls to
Yeah.
women's marches. And that's important and that's great, but it
Yes.
doesn't really cut it because when there's sexism all around you, but you don't know it, it's like walking around with walking pneumonia or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel like shit, but you don't know why.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great metaphor. And I have sons, but I obviously know lots of girls and was a girl. And when I see the t-shirts that are like girls are going to run the world, I just, part of me like, it's like a gut punch a little bit because
really.
that would be lovely. I would love if that happened, but that's not the reality that's happening a lot of places right now. In fact, things are getting rolled back and they're trying to take away what little autonomy we have. So running the world feels like a real breach. So to acknowledge the reality, and it's funny, I just read this book. I have some questions for you, which was I was talking about by Rebecca Mackay,
Oh,
which is she's similar to my age, the protagonist, but it flashes back to high school. It's like a murder mystery. And at one point, they're talking about teenage girls of now and talking about it feels like sending pigs to slaughter. Like you're fattening up, you're giving them all this confidence, you're telling them, they can, and then you're just sending them out there like it's going to be great. It's just, it's not.
that's exactly it. That
Yeah.
is on my very long TBR
Yeah.
list. And now I'm moving it up. Uh,
Yeah. Because
And
and
like
it's about, a girl getting murdered and all the crimes against women and how we sort of just become desensitized to them, like so many things that are going on, because it's just a low hum or a loud scream, but it's there, just kind of there with us, and it feels insurmountable. Like, what do you do? So I look forward to your book because it feels important, and I love those books, Boys and Sex and Girls and Sex, because I felt
Peggy
like
Lansing.
they're so good, and they talked about so many things that I felt, and it gave me data to back up feelings that I was having. Um, it's just it's good to just not feel alone with these thoughts.
Yeah. And like even if we know, even sort of beyond the um like the real physical harms that women face, I'm more focused. I mean, I do talk about that in the book, but I'm more focused on the everyday sexism that
Yeah,
like chips away at girls' self-esteem that we think we're past, right?
yeah.
Post-feminist, post-sexism, girls do better in school than boys. They go to university. Like there's all of these things that we can cite that say girls are doing great, relatively speaking,
Mm-hmm.
compared to the past. Um, but it doesn't take into account all the little ways that by the time they're finished college, right, I mean, they don't get paid the same. They don't,
Exactly.
you know, there,
Exactly.
there's, the, how many gaps can we talk about? The confidence gap, the wage gap, the money gap, the orgasm gap.
Yes, which is what I loved about that book, and was just kind of horrifying too. It was like, oh no, like we're going backwards. People are talking about it less and having less orgasms, and I was like, oh no, this is this isn't good, because it's like you say, it's the things we can see, and it's also all these other things. And yes, they are doing great in school, but then what?
Right.
And I lived that reality. I did
Me
great.
too.
I
We
was a real accomplisher. I did all the things, and then you hit reality, and it's tough.
Yeah, you hit reality, and even though, like, you operate on these two different levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, you're like, I deserve these things. I worked hard for these things. And then on the other hand, there's this like voice, right, about how unentitled you are. And well, maybe I'm being talked over because I'm inarticulate, or I'm being interrupted because what I have to say isn't important. And
Mm-hmm.
however we fill in the blanks, so it's sort of we think of being entitled as a negative thing, but the
Mm-hmm.
girls I work with in my practice so often are just sort of don't have a healthy sense of entitlement, right? And
Yeah.
so my goal in the book is to sort of give parents the language to really talk about this stuff with
Mm-hmm.
their girls
Mm-hmm.
and with their boys. Like I touch on
Yeah.
boys stuff because
Yeah.
obviously the world's not going to change until the
No.
boys change too. But girls is my jam. So
Yes. Well, I
what
think
I
it's
start with.
exciting and important, and I love teenagers. I think they're endlessly fascinating and brilliant, and I think anything that addresses that and gives them, an opportunity to be seen.
And it's particularly tricky with adolescent girls when it comes to, like, I have a 15-year-old now.
Oh, me too.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's funny. And they're all about choice feminism,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, of course everybody
Yeah.
should do what they want and not be judged. And
Mm-hmm.
women can't win, so they may as well do what they want anyway.
Mm-hmm.
um, on the other hand, right, their choices are not made as freely as they
Mm-hmm.
necessarily believe they are, right? Like as I've said to my daughter, a cigar is just a cigar, but a crop top, Brazilian wax, and dieting is never as simple as free choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
so let's talk about that, and let's talk about culture and help. I think it's important to help girls become cultural critics,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sort of they are moving in that direction big time with TikTok and Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and body positivity and all of that. But I think they're
Mm-hmm.
not really prepared for it when it happens to them personally. right? When they're
Yeah,
called a slut because they wore mini skirts to school or whatever,
yeah.
it's like a whole other ball game. And so that's where I want them to have the parents backing before, knowing what to expect, and after if they are sort of harassed or assaulted or
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, all the clothes have come back, and I think choice feminism reminds me a lot of the feminism that was around in the 90s, where it's like,
girl power. Yes,
yeah, it's
Spice
just like,
Girls.
oh, here we go again. Because, I was a person who would say, oh, I'm a feminist, and people would look at me like, ew. Like, I mean, I believe in equal pay, but I'm not a feminist. That's so, ooh. So we got to come up with a new brand to fit all the time. And instead of just saying, yeah, it's ever evolving and it's not perfect and it's had problems and it has not been intersectional. And like, there are so many things that could be better.
Absolutely.
And,
Right.
you know, so anyway, I'm excited for your book. And I knew I was just excited about this conversation because I do love your social media account. And, I
Thank
think it's
you.
important to be a feminist in all things,
I love your
including
social
parenting.
media account. So
Thank you. Thank you. So are you ready to read your poem?
sure am. Um, I am from pink swaddles and slippery driveways, from patent leather party shoes, itchy tights, and eye-watering ponytails, from climbing trees and racing downhill with my BFF. I come in second. I am from Swiss rolls and vinegar chips and wood-fired Montreal bagels only. From the yellow room with shelves that fall and beeping sheets of Egyptian cotton sprawl. The dolls and books and urine clash, heedless of my breathing's midnight impasse. I am from Amaryllis, bulbous and bare, awaiting the belladonna, who comes, then goes, and comes again. I am from curated smiles and coded messages, from Helen's kitzels and Ray's love pinches. I am from the you're too sensitives and that didn't happens, from the don't be prouds and humble brags, from always in moderation and no elbows on the table. I'm from women on the periphery, grateful for the crumbs, gorging on resentment. I'm from Canada, Russia, Romania, Hungary, the US, from matzo balls and gallon-sized peanut butter jars. From the Jew whose broken noose scared off a pogrom. Only the devil, they said, survives. They don't know Jews. They don't know women. They don't know rebels or how to tie a knot. I am from, they don't know where.
That was beautiful. And so much of it felt familiar to me, eye-watering ponytails, and all of that one made me like, because I remember, God, they hurt. Why were they so tight? And all the sayings are very familiar. And then the ending is such a gut punch because historically we all know about those kinds of tests like drownings and hangings. And if you survive, you're the thing they accused you of. And if you die, you're not. And there's no, like way to
I haven't thought about it like that, but right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like with witches, if you drown,
Right.
well, I guess you weren't a witch. And if you do not drown, you are a witch, and then they'll just kill you some other way. Yeah. So it seems like with pogroms, it was the same kind of mass murdering with these made up reasons and logic. And what a miracle that your ancestors survived.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's actually my great grandfather.
Wow. I think we're all, as someone was, I can't remember who was talking about whenever they doubt themselves, they just think of all the people who came before them that had to go through whatever they went through to get here, to make their life possible. And there is, I think we all have ancestors. I think life was hard, different varying reasons, but like we all have ancestors who did something superlative to make it possible for us to be here.
And to make
And
our lives easier, yeah.
yeah, that too. But just how amazing to know that story about your great grandfather. Um, so, what was it like for you writing this poem?
Um, what was it like? It was easier than I thought
Yeah,
because, you give us this nice outline.
it helps.
But, and like I've heard you say before, right? It's sort of like a Mad Libs. And so I
Hmm.
decided to just do it as like a stream of consciousness, like whatever, free association,
Yeah,
right? It's what I encourage all my patients to do. So I was like,
yeah, yeah. It's like
associate.
it is like that, like a generative
Yeah.
writing exercise that you could use in those.
And so it made me, I mean, if anything, that was the harder part, right? Was like really going back and sort of seeing what came up and then being surprised. But more than anything, it was intimidating, right? I'm not a poet.
I
I'm not a
know.
poet. I write
Me either.
nonfiction. I cite research. I give opinions. I'm not a poet.
Yeah.
I'd love to, actually, it was so much fun writing this that it sort of makes me want to strengthen that muscle.
Hmm. I think it gets us in touch with some piece of ourselves. There's something about it that is uh, can unlock things, I think. And I was fascinated listening to your poem because when I first received it, it's like, oh, I wonder if there'll be anything in here about growing up a girl or women, because that is your book and your research. And so um, there is. And and that idea, I feel like more of us are talking about, surviving on crumbs or feasting on crumbs or taking what's left behind. And um, but the resentment that is that's tandem with that. Like there is a consequence
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
yeah.
Right.
So
And I think, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I grew up, I had three brothers, so I sort of saw the,
I have four brothers.
wow, you've got some stuff in common. Do you have any sisters?
So there's a reason we're feminists.
Right?
Yes.
And so, I saw the unequal treatment or
Yeah.
differential treatment. Sometimes I guess you could say the treatment was better, but that just sort of elicits envy in the siblings, in the
Hmm.
boys. But for the, it wasn't treatment that I ever wanted.
Hmm.
And so beyond that, it was like me watching my mother and her sisters and their friends and and not understanding why they were so. I mean, literally, we went to a synagogue where the women were on the periphery and the men were down the center of the room. And when I would ask about it, it was like, that's just how it's done.
Hmm. Tradition. Yeah.
Tradition,
Yeah.
tradition. And to this day, we've got sexist traditions that are
For
called
sure.
traditions,
Hmm.
sexist stuff that are called traditions.
Hmm.
I was going to say something else though.
That's interesting that
Oh,
you. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just thinking about like what you were saying in terms of like there's a consequence, right? So you see that a lot in straight relationships
Yes.
with the mental load or emotional
Yes.
labor and then the men, they're like, I don't get why she's so pissed off all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a consequence.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. True. That's all I can say is like, and you see it in the relationships and my friends. And I mean, my, everyone in my family was either divorced or just drowning in resentment. Like I did not have, role models of marriage. And I did not think I would ever really do it. It just, I mean, partially because I was told I was difficult and hard to love. So I thought, oh, I'm difficult and hard to love. And, but also just because I'm, it didn't look so great, honestly, So I just, it's been the surprise of my lifetime that I am married and today happens to be my 20th wedding anniversary. So,
Oh,
um,
wow. Plenty of
uh,
happy
thank
anniversary.
you. And, and I think, and I'm grateful that I looked for role models outside of my family of origin. But I didn't just say like, okay, I'm going to make it work when they didn't. I was just like, oh, this doesn't work. There has to be a better model out there. Like there have to be people have to enjoy this, right? Like it can't just be a financial arrangement. And if it is a financial arrangement, let's just call it that
Right.
instead of something else.
Did you like major in women's studies or?
No, but I did take some classes, but they were not my favorite classes. Like I did take them thinking I would do it. And then it was not that inspiring. Instead I just read it on my own and
Yeah.
just kind of
Well,
just
I'm
kept.
impressed by that because no, I mean, I don't know how, I mean, I didn't do women's studies classes. I mean, I can't even remember
We had it
if my
because I
college
took intro to
had it.
women's studies, and I distinctly remember when they asked, because like the first day, and of course it's like 40 women and 2 men or something, and God bless those men. So they had us raise our hands and say, who here identifies as a feminist? And I just assumed everyone raised their hand. It's an intro to women's studies class. And the girl next to me, who was the only woman I knew in the class, didn't raise her hand. And I was like, why aren't you raising your hand? Like, why are you doing that? And she said, well, I would never call myself a feminist.
Gross, hairy,
Yeah. Just
mean.
like, yeah, I think there was a lot of like just assuming that you were queer, not that that should make it a bad thing, but that was definitely
Gotcha.
weaponized in that day and age. And I certainly got that thrown my way and was always like, okay. I mean, if that's supposed to be some kind of deterrent for me to be doing what I'm doing, it's not.
Right.
So figure something else out
Yeah.
because that's not, it's so, ugh.
I actually like other than like my entire history, I can't really pinpoint when I became a feminist and when
Oh.
it started to become important. Like I asked my college friends, was I a feminist in college? Like, did we
Mm-hmm.
even offer women's studies?
Mm-hmm.
But like a major turning point for me was in graduate school. I was in a very progressive graduate school, and we were dealing with things that a lot of schools at that time weren't dealing with, right? Like gender and race and
Mm-hmm.
um, intersectional feminism and stuff like that. And so I wrote, I think it was like a developmental psychology class, and I wrote about my family, and I said something how I've always been told I'm too sensitive. And
Yes.
my teacher, Annie Rogers, who is just this incredible human, um, wrote like what did she say? That's what we tell girls when we want to, when we don't want to hear what they have to say,
Mm-hmm.
when we don't want to hear about their feelings, when we want to shut them up. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
shit, like I've known this my entire life, and hearing it from somebody else is like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Oh yeah.
not,
Yeah.
I'm
Someone who
not
wasn't there
crazy.
too. I think
Somebody
that's
I
all.
admire and
Yes.
somebody who
Yes.
has been studying this her whole life. And yeah,
Yeah. So
her,
validating when some, like a third party, well, you're a clinical psychologist, when a third party who wasn't sitting there at the table says, okay, that wasn't okay.
which,
There's,
which probably explains why I became a coach.
because it feels like, okay, it's like you can breathe for the first time. And I will say it's weaponized against boys too. As a person who has like boys, like sensitive is also
Oh God, yes.
used. And I'm reading the book Sensitive right now, and I can't remember who recommended it to me, and I'm reading it, and obviously I'm a sensitive person, like a highly sensitive person. And I'm thinking it's funny because I'm practically like tearing up the whole time I'm reading it.
Is it a book about boys or just about highly sensitive
No,
people?
it's about like the gene and the traits of being a sensitive person, and just talking about like how 30% of us are sensitive people and how our society is all about, I mean, it's capitalist and white supremacist and misogynist. So it's all about being tough, right? And that's something I very much internalized to survive and considered myself tough. And I think lots of other people did as well. Meanwhile, I was like hiding and crying by myself, you know. So it feel, and I was like always a person. Anyone who knows me knows I'm cry at like every movie, every television show, every commercial, everything. And I would just kind of silently try to do that, and not get made fun of. And so for me, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I've always been this way. And it's not just the complex PTSD. Like it is also like part of who I am. Like it's not just a trauma response, it's also me.
Right.
And so I think that is, it's just nice to feel validated.
And I mean, I think it's like you're bringing up such a good point with boys, right? I mean, it's all based on sort of patriarchy and sexism, right? That anything that puts a boy like a girl is
the ultimate insult.
The ultimate insult. And so we teach them to not be like us.
Mm-hmm. I talk about that a lot with my kids. And I love the book Word Slut by Amanda Montell, because she talks in one of her chapters, she talks about, you know, how so many insults are from words for women. And even ones that we don't even track, like because it's so far back in history that it was associated with woman or women or womanhood. And I just thought that was such an interesting chapter. And so I talked to them about when I was reading it, you know, this word, this word, this word, this word. That's the ultimate insult. If you're a boy and you are like a girl or approximating a girl, you're a failure.
Right.
You're an embarrassment.
Right. And girls don't own emotions. Like we all have a full range of emotions if we're allowed to express them.
Exactly. I've had people ask me, oh, you know, your sons, I have a younger son too, like they have emotions. How do you do that? I said, well, you just treat them. Like when they cry, you hold them. You don't tell them to toughen up or suck it up or stop crying. And I know that was very much the environment that I was raised in. And I thought it was interesting, not just with me, but with everyone. And I thought it was interesting that when you said that about getting different treatment as a girl and then they would be jealous of it, I'd kind of forgotten that. That was definitely a facet of being the only girl. The different treatment that, sometimes I resented it, but to them, I mean, I did get more.
Right. Like I don't have to take out the garbage, or I get jewelry for no reason at all.
I get a fancy dress. I get taken out to dinner. There was that. And so I thought I always appreciate reminders of what other people were experiencing,
that's really that's actually really what I'm hoping the book will do, because the more, I think it's so normalized that we don't even recognize it. And so if we can recognize it in ourselves and sort of like heal ourselves, we're going to be in such a better position to help our kids.
I agree. Well, wholeheartedly with that sentiment, because I think most of us get completely overwhelmed with the world because there's just so much going on and we feel powerless. And I just try to remember, like, all I can do is myself. Like, all I can heal is myself. And that's a full-time job. Like, I don't need to heal the world. Even if I could, I can't. So I think the more compassion we have for ourselves, the more compassion we have for others. And
that's why I think I genuinely believe that therapy is revolutionary, because it's like changing the world one parent at a time.
Yeah. And trying to break those patterns or evolve.
Right. Because there's so much intergenerational transmission of trauma, even if you're really good at hiding it, right? Like even if you're so good at never talking about
yelling
your body image in front of or your weight in front of your daughter. It's like they know. It's definitely better and it's not hopeless, right? But they know. And actually there's research that shows that if parents have issues with their daughter's body image, even if they've never said it to their daughter, the daughters have poorer body image.
Breaks my heart a little bit.
That,
That breaks my heart a little bit, but also feels real because I have a tween and I'm watching these girls. And I think I also like, yes, I have sons, but I'm around the kids a lot. And I watch these girls from like when they're in kindergarten to now high school. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch them stop eating.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. I mean,
yeah.
I'm watching it happen in real time.
Yeah. Or like they come up with really clever ideas about what, well, I don't really like that. And as a girl who had disordered eating, but felt like I was in a good space because I didn't have an eating disorder, and I had so many friends who were bulimic and anorexic and like, I mean, extremely so. And so I felt like, well, I'm not doing that. So I'm winning,
Yeah.
But I was disordered and so many of the things these girls say reminds me of that. Oh, I'm a picky eater. Oh, I don't eat that. Oh, I can't. And oh man. So
and to be honest, some of them really don't know, right?
Of course.
It happens on this really unconscious
I
level.
didn't know.
I need to really, yeah. And they get themselves into a place of starvation.
Yeah.
And then they say, I just get full sooner. And like, you really do, but that's because you've gotten yourself to a place of starvation.
Yes. And you have a whole system that's supporting that behavior. I mean, I was a gymnast. You get weighed every time you go to the gym. You're going to internalize that.
Gave me the chills as soon as you said I was a gymnast. Like,
yeah. Cause it's like, how much do you weigh? How much do you weigh? How tall are you? And I just read such a great memoir, Brace for Impact by Gabe Montesanti. And she was a swimmer in high school and college. And she talks a lot about that push to always be lighter, which is code for thinner, because you could perform better,
right.
Not because there's anything wrong with it, not being lighter. And I just thought it was interesting because on the one hand, you're very inspired by what your body can do. It's very empowering. Look at what I can do. And then on the other hand, you have people just trying to make you smaller.
Right. But I can't do it. I'm unhealthy is sort of the weird message.
Yeah. So I was so happy to read it. I read a lot. And it is because of that.
I can tell.
Seeing yourself. Yeah. I mean, it's like I've always been this way, but now I actually talk about it more because I used to be sort of like, I'm not, people would think I was bragging or something. It's like, no, I'm not trying to say, look at all the books I read. I'm just like so excited that I read something that helped me feel less alone. That's why I'm talking about the book I read.
Yeah.
And you can read it too. And they're always like, no.
Why not?
No, I'm good. So I'm just like, I'm so happy to be getting older because I am happier and more content with myself. And I feel like that's a whole nother conversation, but like there's so much shame about growing older and looking your age. As if we now need to disappear. Now that we finally like ourselves, please just go away. Like, no.
Absolutely right. We are not going anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Even if you can't see us because we don't look how you want us to look. But, I mean, I still have, I definitely feel more confident and better about myself and I'm excited about my gray.
Yes, good for you.
But, I scroll Instagram and like, the skincare stuff. I'm like, no,
skincare stuff.
Stop.
It's so true.
It's so compelling. And
it is. And it's all fake. Like intellectually, I know it's all fake because I know they're using filters and light and all the thing. I mean, because I went to film school and I know it's fake. But it's still like, oh, do you think? Do you think that could make my neck different?
Exactly. And oh my God, the neck, right? Like, I didn't know about the neck.
I didn't either.
Know about the neck
and when it started happening, I was like, is this happening to everyone?
Until Zoom and the pandemic, I was like, oh, here's another thing to worry about.
Right. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. No, it's not like I'm perfect, but I definitely just like myself more than I did when I was 18, So it's just, I'm not going to now disappear because I am not fuckable or whatever rubric we're using for women needing to take up space. So I'm not gonna, and trust me, my mom is 82 and she still has somehow older men hitting on her. It never ends. Like you're never
That's
too
really
old.
interesting. Yeah.
Like,
I actually think maybe it takes a break and then, the men lose their wives and they're looking. My grandmother refused to remarry. She's like, I don't want to be
yeah,
a
she's a
nurse.
hot ticket, right?
She was like, I don't want to be a nurse.
Yeah. Same with my, I mean, she was just like, what are you signing up for? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I didn't even mean like perfect, imperfect. I mean,
Yes.
like,
No, I know,
why,
but
like I don't want to have to worry about these things. And yet they're in my face all of the time.
yes.
And I've got to shut the voices up because they're old. They're so old. And,
Yes.
and if that's what we're doing when we're this age, it's like, and we are very clear intellectually, all of these ads are bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
How are our kids who also know it intellectually gonna, and they're not. I mean, I'm watching it. They're not.
No, it's hard. It's heartbreaking. I'm laughing because it's breaking my heart. It's so hard because much like my mom with me when I was that age, and she would tell me her experience and how it was going to be okay. And I would be like, you don't understand. It's like, you can't, there's no transplant. You can't like take it just, but you can try to help and just be there.
Your
And
mom would tell you about like what like her experience with being a woman and
yeah,
and it sort of being unfair or being
yeah,
intrusive or
yeah,
wow,
yeah.
that's pretty progressive that she could
Oh,
have
she was
put
very
that into words.
progressive. She was incredibly progressive. My parents were divorced, and she was always like, now to the point where it felt like too much. But she was always sharing with me her experiences and what it was like moving through the world. And she was a flight attendant in the '60s, so she was very much like a sex object.
Totally.
That was her job. And
She was not a flight attendant. She was a stewardess.
yes, that's right. She was a stewardess and had those outfits that like people now post all over Pinterest, those uniforms. And was aware of it. There was a weight requirement for the job. And when she first joined, there was forced retirement at 30, very young.
Yeah, I remember hearing 30
Yeah.
or 35.
And the union got that rolled back. But so when she first started, that's what it was. It was essentially a job for young, hot women in their 20s to land husbands. Like that was and she was like, no, this is my career.
And to pleasure the passengers and the pilots.
Yes, the almost all male passengers. And she was like, no, this is my career. And she
like, joke's on you.
Yeah, career. Women don't have career. Spinsters have careers. If you want to do that, you got to go be a school teacher. Women like you don't have careers. So yeah, she was very forthright about all of that, and it helps.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I so wish the sort of adults in my life had been able to name it, validate it. I think it would have been a whole different ballgame for me. But I'm doing that with my daughter, and she finds it too much.
Well, it's always
Mom. Yeah. I'm gonna, but we gotta say it. Or I say, like we never really have talked about when you're taking public trans. This is when she. Yes, we have, and it's like I know we haven't, but she gets the general concept. But I still feel like I need to say it, and I don't think when we say these things it's for naught. As you might be an example of that, right?
No, I don't. Yes, I definitely think saying these things is important, and everyone laughs at me, and that's fine. I mean, like lovingly. But when I talk about racism again and white privilege again, it's like that's my job. I'm a white lady. We're gonna talk about it.
Yes.
And that's fine. I'm okay with being that person. And yes, and talking about sexism and talking about consent.
It was too much for your mother to talk about it.
Well, there was more. That stuff wasn't too much.
There was perfect. I'm just saying, like, you know what I mean? It got into your consciousness and made you kind of ask yourself. It sounds like it made you ask yourself, like, there's got to be more.
Oh yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted. You were saying something about consent.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about that. Like sorry, but you just kind of talk. I don't know. I also think, and I love that, and I know we need to wrap up, but I love that about the boys and sex and girls and sex books, like that was validating too, because I've always talked to my kids about sex, and the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And that's true, I think, with everything, like with
And you can start
sexism, with
really young,
yes,
right? There's
and
so
just
many ages.
normalizing it. And whatever they're coming to you with, like, try not to. I had a parent just last week talking about that it's hard for her, and she acknowledged that it was hard for her, but she just did it. You know, like, you gotta just
Do it.
do it, and because they're gonna learn it somewhere. And I'd rather at least to be, I'm like the first person, so there's something in there that's like doing battle with all the other information or misinformation. um
They'll get it from their friends and
oh
the
yeah,
internet and
oh yeah,
pornography, and
I
it's
know,
going to be inaccurate and unhealthy. So we got to do it.
I know. I'm like the broken record about pornography. Like, that's not real. I just feel like we got to, just like with the skincare products,
With the what?
just like with the skincare products,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's not real. What's happening, neither is that. You know, it's all a
Tell me
product.
that again. It's not real.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
People
And
are,
that's why I think it's so important to, like, see people in real life and connect with them and connect with people. Like, it's not real. And none of you are the age you're saying you are. Oh, it just makes me a little bit angry. So thank you for joining me, Joanne, and sharing your
my
poem and
pleasure.
talking about all of this about feminism and your book. And that's good stuff. I really look forward to it. And I wish
So
you
fun.
so much luck with it and the launch and all of it.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed this.
You're welcome.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Take care.